What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I got a few updates for you to include another prominent college player who has decided to opt out of the 2020 season, give you some updates on the most recent numbers that the NFLPA has put out for positive tests, talk about that, and then also the Dolphins have put or are putting several players onto the COVID reserve list. Now, that obviously could just mean that they came in contact with somebody. That doesn't necessarily mean that they tested positive. But they are going to be putting several, 6 in fact. So we'll get to that too. First, I want to start with, though, the college player that has decided to opt out of the 2020 season. And it looks like Miami's Greg Rousseau will opt out of CFB season amid pandemic, Manny Diaz says. Miami defensive end Gregory Rousseau has opted out of the 2020 college football season. Hurricanes head coach Manny Diaz confirmed Rousseau's decision to reporters on Thursday. The redshirt sophomore had 15.5 sacks and 54 tackles in 2019, earning ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year honors. We support him 100% in his decision, Hurricanes defensive coordinator Blake Baker said, per Christy Chirinos of Miami's official athletic site. We'd had some conversations with him in the previous days and knew it was something on his mind. At the end of the day, we support him. Rousseau joins the list of players who have decided to sit out the upcoming year amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Virginia Tech cornerback Caleb Farley was the first, followed by Minnesota wide receiver Rashad Bateman and Penn State defensive end Micah Parsons. Given what he achieved in his first full season on the field, expectations were high for Rousseau. Bleacher Report's Matt Miller ranked him 11th in his initial big board for the 2021 draft. Number 11th overall for the draft in 2021. And now this guy's going to be sitting out the entire 2020 season. Rousseau may have already played his last game for Miami, and the obvious question is whether he's the last highly ranked draft prospect who decides to opt out. So yeah, I mean that's definitely something we're going to keep our eye on. Miami had added Quincy Roche as a graduate transfer from Temple to bolster its D line. Blah 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 blah. Anyway, so like I said, I mean, the dominoes do continue to fall, so we'll see how it plays out and, whether or not the college season or the NFL season can make it through its entirety. I'm not confident or convinced of that, so we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, let's transition a little bit, though, and get to the numbers that have been given to us most recently by the NFLPA for positive tests in the NFL. So this comes from Yahoo Sports. NFLPA releases encouraging results of early COVID testing. NFL players have reported to training camp and completed their COVID-19 intake testing, and the results for that first round of testing are encouraging. The NFLPA released those results on Thursday morning, and approximately 2% of players tested positive for COVID-19, which is 56 players. So we're going to pause right there for just a second. Now that's below their threshold, right? Which means that they will likely, now they still have another week of training camp to go where they're doing testing every day. If it stays below that, then they will start doing it every other day, which I think is a terrible decision. I don't think the testing every day is going to be quite near enough. However, let's put this all into perspective. So they are below that 2%, but they had 2.5% of the entire player population prior to training camp, prior to even coming in. So you might say, okay, well, that's a drop by 0.5%. Okay, but at the same time, we also know that they told us themselves that in their count, their official count, they're not going to be counting staff members and support personnel and so on and so forth. It's just going to be players. Now, does that mean that if they were counting staff members into it, would it then, go up to 5% or above 5%? I don't know. Probably not. But it's still problematic. But anyway, I mean, look, and we'll see how long it lasts, right? Because they literally just got into it. This thing especially, and one of the big factors that I think people are not taking into account enough is that not only is this thing still extremely bad right now, but it is expected to get far worse as we get into the normal 6th season of the year, right? So the winter months, the fall and winter months are the months generally when like flu season comes around, which is going to greatly exacerbate the situation even further. And with the way that our leadership in this country just doesn't care to fucking do a goddamn thing about it, basically, for the most part, you know, it's just, anyway, it's just, like I said, I've said it a million times, it's adding up to bad things. But let's continue on. So Tom Pelissero did tweet out, the NFLPA says 56 players have tested positive for COVID-19 since players began reporting to training camp. I mean, look, again, it is below their 5%. I think that 2% is 2% too much. Personally, I think it's, you know, there's a substantial likelihood that it could, you know, get worse and they could have significant outbreaks that shut down entire teams. But we'll see, man. To be fair, we'll see, right? There are still things that have to play out, and let's see if their protocols and their measures and so on and so forth are going to be adequate enough. That's about 2% of the 2,600 players on active rosters, and well under a 1% positivity rate in terms of total tests administered. Still very early, but good signs. That's 56. Let's see. With the COVID-19 opt-out date arriving Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, that's 1 p.m. here, so that means it's already passed as of me making this video. That figure could put the minds of many players at ease. Man, I don't like that though, especially because they shouldn't be at ease, and especially if they're gonna then drop testing to every other day. You're playing with fire, man. You're just fucking playing with fire. Anyway, most players did not have COVID-19 when they came to camp, and it appears that there has been minimal spread since. If everyone remains careful, the NFL might avoid disaster and execute a safe season. That's a big, big if. That's a huge if. I mean, anyway, you guys know how I feel. Real tests for NFL will come in September. The small number of positive tests since players began reporting is encouraging, but it doesn't tell us all that much about the NFL safety protocols. Remember, MLB's initial positive rate after intake testing was also below 2%. We've seen how that turned out. Outbreaks on 2 teams before the season was 2 weeks old. The NFL will get the first real, and that's before wintertime comes. It's going to be far worse when they're trying to actually play games in the wintertime. And especially like in cold weather environments, bruh. Nah, it's fucking retarded. Anyway. Let's see. The NFL will get the first real look at how its protocols are working after August 17th when full contact practices begin. That'll be the first, but then, you know, early to mid-September, we're going to actually start getting games because there's no preseason, and it's gonna get worse, right? The probability of spread and outbreaks, etc., is going to increase. Unquestionably. Whether it actually happens or not is what we have to wait and see. But the probability that it happens will drastically increase, because then we're going to transition into padded practices where they're actually coming into a lot more contact with each other. Then we're going to get into games where now you're not only just coming into contact with people on your own team, but the other teams, etc. So nobody can deny that the probability of, you know, these terrible things happening doesn't increase. Like, you can't argue that. Anyway, and the NFL will begin first protocols when full contact practices begin. Sweaty players will be getting close to each other, up in each other's faces in ways they haven't yet. Each team will be as safe as only their least safe member, which is a disaster as fuck. I'm just telling you, man. Full contact practices are small potatoes compared to what comes next, the start of the regular season in September. That's when the real test will begin. That's where MLB stumbled, and the NFL is obviously hoping to avoid the same outcome. Even though their safety protocols, like MLB's, rely on the personal responsibility of each player to stay safe. And, you know, they've started talking about all kinds of ways to, like, fine players and, like, punish them, but that's not the way to do it, man. I'm telling you, and look, history has shown, I mean, even look, if you got kids, what happens when you punish your kids? A lot of the times they fucking, I mean, unless you like whoop the shit out of your kid, but like if you just do, you know, if you like, you know, give them time out or take toys away or whatever, oftentimes they'll continue to act out, or at least do it again later, right? Because, you know, they'll push the limits, right? Anyway, And when it comes to grown people, it greatly depends on what kind of things that they believe, right? So anyway, teams will be traveling to different cities and getting close to players they haven't interacted with yet. The safety of 2 entire teams will be on each player's shoulders. If someone on the offensive line of a visiting team decides to go out to a bar while he's playing in New Orleans, that puts 2 entire teams at risk. It doesn't have to be New Orleans or even a bar. It could be a convenience store in Cincinnati or a trusted friend's house in Dallas. That's exactly right, because you just don't know. And you might think, oh, I'm good. I know how I'm taking care of my shit. And look. At the same time, though, it's also fair to understand that people do need to figure out how to live their lives during this pandemic. So, in the case of like a trusted friend, if you think you're doing the right thing and, your friend's doing the right thing, I don't necessarily fault you actually for doing that. The problem then becomes when then they have to go to work and put on this fucking entertainment show for the profits of billionaires and the NFL, right? Because it shouldn't be a situation like none of that should be a risk to begin with, right? If people in their own personal lives want to take that little bit of a risk and go to their friend's house or family members because they don't want to go crazy sitting in their house all alone, whatever, okay. But if you get it and then you go back home to your own place, the spread is not going to be to the rest of your team and your entire fucking franchise and another team, etc., etc., etc. It's going to be contained to you and maybe possibly anybody else you live with, which is also bad. But obviously far less of an impact on the greater scale than taking it through, fucking buildings with, a bunch of sweaty dudes walking around, getting close to each other and all that shit. Anyway, according to the Miami Marlins owner, Derek Jeter, their team outbreak could have started from those innocent outings. There's no reason to look at the low positivity rate as anything but good news. Early on, things are working and players are staying safe, but things have barely begun. There are major trials in the NFL's future. Let's hope the NFL and every single one of its players is up to the task. I mean, look, again, obviously, I hope that's the case. I just don't see how it's possible. I really don't. I personally don't see how it's possible, but, we'll see. So, anyway, there is some important news, though, regarding the Dolphins in particular that I told you I wanted to let you guys know about, because they did put a bunch of players onto the COVID-19 reserve list. So their list is actually expanding. Now, to be fair, the COVID-19 reserve list is players who have either tested positive or who have been known to come into contact with somebody who had tested positive, right? So right now there's a 2% positivity rate, right? So 2% of the personnel in the league have tested positive. There's also an additional group of people, a larger group of people that are, sidelined because they've come into contact, right? So, anyway, the Dolphins have made some moves. They actually also got rid of a cornerback, one of the cornerbacks that they picked up before. I believe it was from the Kansas City Chiefs, cornerback Javaris Davis. They have waived him, which is interesting because they also just got rid of Cordray Tankersley, and currently Xavier Howard is on the PUP list. So now their cornerback room is seemingly taking a bunch of hits. And that was one of their strengths, certainly on defense, at least theoretically and on paper. So that's a bit concerning too, and doesn't exactly give me any fuzzy feelings any more than I had before going into the season as far as, what I think that their product on the field is going to be. Xavier Howard seems to be hurt. Cordray Tankersley is gone. And now one of the cornerbacks that they just brought in recently to, bolster the depth chart at the very least, they got rid of. Anyway, but so the Dolphins have placed 6 players on the COVID-19 reserve list today. That is Raekwon Davis. That is one of their rookies, their rookie defensive tackle. Benito Jones, who was on the list before and has now been put back on the list. My guess, though, is at the very least the first time was because he came into contact with somebody, not because he tested positive. However, I don't know about this time, so it could be either one. Brandon Jones, Solomon Kindley, both of those guys are rookie draft picks of this year. Brandon Jones is the safety. Solomon Kindley is, I believe, an offensive lineman. Shaq Lawson, one of their high-priced free agent defensive ends. And Kirk Merritt, I think, is a wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. They did also, though, activate Malcolm Perry and defensive tackle Zach Seiler off of the reserve list, which leads me to believe that they had only come into contact with somebody who tested positive and didn't test positive themselves. So in the Malcolm Perry situation, that means likely then he did not test positive himself. He only came into contact with somebody who had tested positive, but which means that he didn't catch it a second time, right? Because he has already had it. He's donated plasma, and so that's why part of the reason why it was curious that he went back on the list. So it would appear that it was simply because he came into contact with somebody. But it doesn't change the fact that they still feared that he could have gotten it again, you know, and so on and so forth. Anyway, but that, I do believe, is about it. I think that wraps up everything. Couple guys came off. Malcolm Perry, Zach Seiler. A bunch of guys went on. Raekwon Davis, Benito Jones, Brandon Jones, Solomon Kindley, Shaq Lawson, and yes, wide receiver Kirk Merritt. And then they waived Javaris Davis, I think it was, the cornerback. Yeah, so that's all I got for you guys. I hope you guys appreciate my perspectives and videos. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.